And if I ever run out of Spyro and E, I'll be one of them a few weeks later, and then some other T girl's gonna put an arrow through my skull and slice off my balls. Oh well, so sad. Hello, readers, writers, and revenants. Come forth, just to prove that I'm still alive. I have a few other things planned for this channel. I'll be going in a few directions, got more recipes to put up, got more videos on subjects that I find interesting. All I wanted to draw your attention to at the moment is a certain occurrence that has moved a little controversy. As many of you will know, JK Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter books, has written extensively about how she thinks that women, biological women, should have their own spaces, and that while we should treat trans women, that's men that have transitioned into women, with respect, they shouldn't always have the same spaces. They should have the right to transition, and she's also drawn attention to the fact that some of them might transition erroneously. I'm condensing what she says in a very concise way. I've talked about it in other videos. But it seems that a trans activist named Gretchen Felker-Martin has got her own back. She's written a book which is about a kind of zombie apocalypse in it, not exactly original, except insofar as, amongst other things, JK Rowling dies, allegedly, in the rubble of a collapsing castle as it burns. The Daily Mail has slammed the reviews that have written about this book positively, saying it's sloppy and not interesting. I do admit that if this person hadn't tweeted out the fact that JK Rowling dies in it, then it would be fairly unremarkable as a book. At least I'm guessing so. It might be of excellent quality. The front cover has a pair of plums inside a string bag, presumably to represent what trans women don't have anymore, I don't know. Maybe it's something else. Maybe the antagonists, or the protagonists, all eat fruit. I don't know. We'll see. But I managed to find a place where I can read at least part of it for free. Now, if this person is acting out of hate, then I don't really want to give them too much money. However, purely because I've already devoted part of this channel towards work by JK Rowling. I'm reviewing her murder mystery book, and also because I'm looking at something to do with the undead in the form of the Aniston-related literature. That's vampires rather than zombies. Why not start another series? It may seem odd that I'm both reading something by JK Rowling and reading something that satirises her. We'll see. Let's see if it's as good as the reviewers say. And if people like it, maybe I will continue with it in some form. As I've discussed before, the key to any successful book is drawing the reader in so that they're interested in some way, so that they care about the central characters that they get to meet. Typically you have a who, a what, a where and a why somewhere in the first paragraph. But the first sentence in this one is, Fran, squinting in the early afternoon glare, watched through her scratched binoculars as the man knelt to drink. No indication as to who Fran may be or where she is. It says the afternoon glare, so we know when. There's a when. The forest was dark and brackish. Brackish? What, you mean it was full of salt marsh? Whatever. Scummed with blossoms of vibrant green algae. Skinny pines, bare branch for a good 20 feet under the canopy of needles surrounded it. The man's matted, filthy hair floated on the surface as he gulped down greedy mouthfuls, tilting his head back to swallow like an alligator hawking down a fish. Like that, apparently. We're in a forest, we know that much, we don't know why, but that's all right. It's kind of an interesting book, there's beautiful scenery in it. They had trouble with swallowing these things. What things? The plague had made out of anyone with enough testosterone in their system to put out a decent crop of back hair. Men, then, basically. She's making fun of men. Okay. Mostly they ripped their prey apart and gulped the meat down in chunks, or dug up grubs and beetles and whatever roots they could get gnarled claws on. They'd eat pretty much anything if it came down to it. Fran had seen one choke on a tennis ball. Well, then it shouldn't be that difficult to kill them, surely. If a choke on a tennis ball, surely you could just appease it with a bit of fruit. Through vegetables. Drive a spike through it so they all choke down. Problem solved. I'm more gruesome than the author already. Well, asked Beth, okay, so we've got a Fran, we've got a Beth. We don't know who any of them are, we don't even know what they look like. Fran lowered the binoculars. He's alone. Can you one-shot him from here? Okay, so these are the zombie-like creatures. Beth was already unlimbering her compound bow. Unlimbering, is that a technique? Is that a name for how you use a bow? Unlimbering usually means you're just straight, surely, inflexible. The scar on her right corner of her mouth drew taut and pulled at her bottom eyelid until a little crescent of wet pink showed under it. Yuck. Okay, so we've got one aesthetic feature of one of the protagonists so far. Don't be a C word. Don't be one or don't have one. For a trans activist, that's kind of a key question. Fran hissed back. Just do it. Beth's smile widened. She knocked a carbon fibre arrow and drew to the bow's full extension, the muscles in her long, thick arms standing out. So we've got a little bit of a description now. She's got a scar and she's got arms. This is dreadful already. She squinted along the arrow's shaft, I'm not going to read that. The high-tension bowstring twanged. The arrow buzzed through the air like a 30-inch hornet. Sounds rather scary. Its arc carrying it up into the branches above. The man, far downslope in a basin, choked with years of rust-coloured fallen pine needles. Again, he choked, so it should be easy to kill him. Looked up from the pool, cracked and scabby skin spitting along fresh fissures to reveal raw pink flesh beneath his face contorting to a snarl, exposing a mouthful of rotting snaggle teeth under a nose pounded flat and smeared into things left cheek by God knew how many unset breaks. Okay, so he dies. That's all you need to know about that. And then Beth starts behaving like an Italian. Fran laughed in spite of herself, her legs going loose and shaky as adrenaline flooded her system. She giggled, picking herself up to follow the taller girl. Okay, so one of them's tall, that's one more feature they've given us. For a single blessed heartbeat, she felt weightless, her neck and back slick with sweat under her sodden tank top. So we know something that she's wearing. Fran cut him open, that's the victim presumably. A V incision to either side of the spine and sliced his adrenal glands off the tops of his kidneys. Then she fished his balls out of his rashy scrotum, then she cut it open. His ballsack exuded a stink like a bath bomb infused with rancid pork. Don't you dare flag this video! This is a widely read book and apparently worthy of a good review. She tried not to look at the other things growing inside him, at the squirming tumours that flinched from his hunting knife and scalpel, hiding among the bones and fleshy membranes like goldfish in the archways and battlements of an Aquarian castle. Birds gathered in the branches overhead as she worked, crows mostly, and the wide-winged shadows of turkey vultures. Okay, so we're somewhere in America, maybe Canada, sweeping in the long, lazy circuits over the forest floor. A red-tailed hawk kept silent watch over the basin and its little surgical tableau. What pretentious writing is this? When Fran was done, she washed her hands in the pool and dried them on the front of her blood-stained, moth-eaten tank. How can a tank be moth-eaten? Do you just mean it was sort of beaten up or something? Or was it literally eaten by moth larvae? And if so, how? They scaled the slope in silence, Beth in the lead and Fran following close behind, neither of them looking behind as the watchful croaking of the carry-on birds became ravenous cacophony, black wings flogging the hot summer air. Now, bear in mind, this is the opening series of paragraphs. We've just been told of the two protagonists. We don't even know if they're black or white or anything. We don't know what they're wearing particularly, except one of them has a tank top. We've been given no explanation as to why this is happening, why this man or how this man turned into a zombie. We have no idea that if they have difficulty swallowing, why they can't just choke them or poison them or something. No, they just have to shoot them with arrows and then slit them open. Quite incoherent so far, but maybe we'll get some more explanation. I'm halfway through this chapter. A few miles from where they'd left their bikes, no reference to the fact that they had bikes at all, but never mind, so they'd left their bikes before coming, fine, at the forest edge. They paused to drink lukewarm water and wolf down stale protein bars. How lovely and vegan. Fran tried to imagine the taste of fresh biscuits drowning in sausage gravy, that's not so vegetarian, rich and buttery and shot through with smooth tang of smoke. Instead, she imagined one of the dead man's tumours slithering back behind his left lung, its half-formed mouth agape in a wheezing grin. I'll give credit to the author on one matter. She is quite gruesome in this description. The plague, okay, for now they're telling us the plague, so finally we might get some explanation as to why or how this happened. The plague, called T-Rex, was as reliable as the atomic unnecessary profanity, clock. First, relentless hunger pangs, mood swings, fever, dermal fissures that wept pus and cloudy blood before scabbing over, bursting, and scabbing again until the skin was nearly an inch thick in places. Delirium, intense spikes of aggression once the initial lava flow of symptoms cooled and hardened into the shrieking, ravenous things that seethed like lice across the entire American subcontinent. Something clicked on inside whatever remained of the man's brain, and he started looking for something to rape, maim, and leave half dead like those wasps that laid their eggs in living tarantulas. Sounds like Hollywood. The good news was that pregnancy was shorter now. Much shorter. The bad news was that the babies ate their way out. Out here on the coast, the things that had been men were scarcer, at least. They couldn't swim, so fish held little allure for them. Basically, the enemy in here are men. I've not been told yet that women can suffer from this. It doesn't say whether the babies born from them are male or female babies, but most of the big game had been killed off years ago. How? And if I ever run out of Spyro and E, I'll be one of them a few weeks later, and then some other tea girl's gonna put an arrow through my skull and slice off my balls. Oh well, so sad. They were almost at the forest edge, making good time over the level ground between the pines, when Fran heard voices. "Wait," she hissed to Beth, flattening herself slowly into the sparse underbrush. "Down, get down." Beth dropped onto her elbows at her side. "I don't see anything," she whispered back. "Are you sure you're not just a jumpy bitch with clinical paranoia you'll never get diagnosed because all the psychiatrists are dead or living in like Monaco in some really tacky American slum?" The dialogue is kind of... I'm not feeling it, you understand? They wormed their way forward for a good 5 minutes, pausing intermittently to listen. Beth's expression sobered when they both heard a high, scratchy woman's voice shriek. Finally, from the relative concealment of a patch of goldenrod glowing in a clearing, almost a tongue twister there, they saw the TERFs. TERF, for anyone who doesn't know, stands for Trans-Exclusionary Radical Feminist. We've already established that the main antagonists are all men, because of course they are, who came to be that way because of some manner of virus called T-Rex. Presumably, if these people are radical feminists, they don't much care for men raping and eating them either. So they should be able to make a temporary alliance, ideologically, but I'll bet you they don't. They can't, because this author is an ideologue. A dozen women, most of them in their late teens or early 20s, a few younger, all in fatigues, most sporting undercuts, stood clustered around the bikes where Fran and... Okay, so they're stereotypical looking lesbian feminists. Fine. Beth groaned, rocking back and forth into her haunches. It's the effing chromosome crusaders. Of course it is. A pale woman of unremarkable height, maybe 40 years old, strode through the divided group towards the bikes. She wore crisp fatigues and a short, tight leather jacket zipped up to her collarbone. On her forehead, dead centre across the bridge of her pert little ski-slope nose, you mean she's white or that it's big? Ski slope. She was a stark tattoo XX. Okay, so she really has to be a chromosome crusader, because of course we all know that people who care about biological sex always have their chromosomes tattooed on their noses. Pussy, certified all natural by the daughters of... I can't even read this, they're just making up words now. "We can wait them out," Fran whispered. "Worst case is they take our bikes and we walk home. We have enough meds to get us there, I think. It should be fine. It's probably more to be fine. Hey, maybe get down a little more." I think what's going on here, the main enemy are of course men, the other enemy are women who happen to be trans-exclusionary, and even with an apocalypse on them, they can't ally themselves with them against a common enemy. You'd think they just allow them to attack one another and kill one another, but they can't do that, so... Maybe these cannibalistic zombie men don't like the taste of feminist. I mean, I could kind of understand that. I probably wouldn't either if I were a zombie. Now, amongst them is another person who's some medical professional, a psychological consultant at Guantanamo Bay, so she's obviously bad. So she's with these women, and presumably, because she offers a rational explanation as to why not all people who say they're trans are what they say they are, she's the enemy as well. So they have to say that she came from Guantanamo to try and discredit her, because she obviously wants people who do transition to be locked up. That's the implication here. The tattooed woman said something that made her retinue laugh. Fran watched her lips move, watched the play of muscles onto her smooth face as she smiled. A cold thrill went up her spine. You don't have to have a wet dream about an effing gender essentialist neo-fascist. So obviously she can't hear what they're saying, but because she is a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, she just assumes that everything they're joking about has to be about that specific thing. It's not even subtle at this point how trans women have to be the hero. You could almost write it yourself. I understand making men the enemy if you're a kind of feminist, because I think that a lot of zombie fiction was a kind of metaphor for racial prejudice. You know, because they were often portrayed by black people with voodoo and whatnot, and so it was a way of making them seem the other, or showing people's paranoid fear about them. And now they're doing the same thing with just men generally, but they're not even trying to make a metaphor for what these feminists are, they're just portraying them as stereotypical lesbian feminists. Of course, there's no explanation why they think what they think. It's almost childish in its attempt to portray the enemy. She bit her lip, cutting through the haze, and the world swam back into normalcy, well, except that Beth was standing up, and she had her bow in one hand and an arrow in the other. The broad-shouldered girl was squinting. It was past noon and the sunlight seemed to be aimed right at them. The shadows were getting long again. So she's going to shoot these feminists, it seems. "What are you doing?" Fran hissed. "Good question. Why are you giving away your hiding places?" Her cock was hard, tenting the front of her stupid cargo shorts. What did that say? Her cock was hard. Her cock was hard. Her cock. No subtlety at all. These are trans women. Surely if there's an apocalypse, it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, trans, gay, straight, whatever. You're trying to stop these people from eating you and raping you. There's nothing. There's no character development at all. There's not yet even been given a backstory as to where this T-Rex virus came from that turned these men into zombies. "Beth, what the F are you doing? Making the world a kinder, gentle place," said Beth, grinning like a fox with its head through the henhouse door as she knocked an arrow to the bowstring and drew it back level with the unscarred corner of her mouth. "I'm going to put one through her effing neck." And it ends there. So, yeah, like I said, she's going to shoot her. So she's going to end this thing by committing murder. So you're going to shoot all the feminists who hate you, and you're not going to even think about trying to choke the zombies to death. Fine. Well, that's the first chapter of this fantastic book so far. I think you can probably tell from my tone that I don't think much of it. If I get some more feedback, people saying they want me to read the rest of it, I'll try. I know I'm reading other books at the same time, but I'll try. But yes, that's how it is at the moment. JK Rowling is still alive at my time of filming this. She's also still alive at this section of the story. So I'm sorry if it makes it look as though the title of this video is clickbait, but as I said, the author tweeted out that JK Rowling dies in this book, so I'm not making much of a spoiler alert by saying it now. You just have some idea about the pretentious language, about the very little description of the protagonists as yet in the first chapter where we are introduced to them, the very limited description as to why the villains are villains, why they became villainous and how, but this is the book that has been reviewed so highly by the National Public Radio Association. And so, yes, this is a little bit of pushback so far. And it might be that the whole thing is wonderful. But the first chapter, I'd say, is not a promising start. As I said, if I get more feedback about this, more enthusiasm, more interest, I shall proceed from this point with this story at the same time as I review JK Rowling's book and Onision's Mother book. Thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Ta-ta!